Now that we know Vice President Dick Cheney and Senator Barack Obama are distant cousins, the New York Post decided to check into the genealogy of President Bush. And his family tree has people talking. Early Show national correspondent Tracy Smith has the story of George W. Bush's many relations.
My honor to bring to you the 41st president, a great dad, George H.W. Bush.
We all know his father, but what about his cousins? Check out this family tree, done with research by Ancestry.com.
What would you say if I told you he's related to all of those people?
That you're wrong.
Oh, no, I'm not. Let me take you through this, branch by branch.
The 101st Airborne Division, Air Assault.
Vice President Dick Cheney, the man who's only a heartbeat away from the presidency, is actually a blood relation. He's President Bush's ninth cousin once removed. Cheney's cousin Barack Obama is also Bush's 11th cousin and the ninth cousin of Brad Pitt. But we're only just getting started. President Lincoln was President Bush's 7th cousin 5 times removed, and Bush shared more than just a ballot with John Kerry. That's right, they're ninth cousins twice removed.
Really? What do you think of that?
Yeah, they have the same chin.
There's also royalty in the Bush bloodline. Princess Diana was Bush's 11th cousin twice removed. And then there's this bombshell.
Happy birthday, Mr. President.
Sure, she may have been singing to JFK, but what about GWB? He is, after all, her ninth cousin 3 times removed.
Maybe it's the eyebrows. I think
They have the same eyebrows?
He's also related to Playboy founder Hugh Hefner, even Pocahontas, and Vlad the Impaler. Trace the family tree far enough, and you get Madonna, Celine Dion, and Tom Hanks.
My mom always said life was like a box of chocolates.
After all, genealogy can sometimes be like a box of chocolates. You never know who you're going to get. For The Early Show, Tracy Smith, no relation to George Bush that I know of. CBS News, New York.
And of course, Barack Obama has said he doesn't think he and Cheney are kissing cousins, but Brad Pitt says if it's true, he's in great company.
What's going on, guys, and welcome to the 29th rendition of the War Cry podcast. I'm your host, Yahola Tiger. As you guys have just heard, this episode is going to be about the Bush family. And one thing about that clip that I just played in the intro, it's kind of wild. They're all related in some form or fashion. I ain't gonna lie, it kind of made me real sad that I found out Brad Pitt was related, and he likes to be a part of that type of club. But this episode is gonna be about the Bush family, so like Prescott, Barbara, Herbert Walker, and George W. And kind of the weird things that they do and have done, and the things that they're a part of. There's a lot of like kind of weird, I would say like borderline like kind of nasty things that they've done. Actually, it is pretty nasty, some of the stuff that they have alleged to do, or people have found out about them later in life. But it all starts with George. So how it's okay? So it's going okay. So I'm going to say Herbert Walker, and I'm going to say George W. Because when I was writing down my notes, I was having a hard time differentiating, so I had to go back and look up like which one actually did what. But every Bush member, going back all the way to before Prescott Bush, has been a member of the Skull and Bones Society, or it's a fraternity, some type of organization within Yale University, which is kind of crazy because like hazing and all that stuff is like kind of illegal now, which is kind of nuts that they're still able to operate, or maybe they're not. Who knows? They might have went down into the secret realms. But Skull and Bones Society is a fraternity / organization, like I said, on the campus of Yale. And the building is actually called the Tomb. I guess it like has no windows, out-facing windows, which is kind of wild. But in the early 2000s, during the Bush run, basically the press got audio and video recordings of kind of what went on, and you can go type those out. You can go search those. I thought about playing it on the podcast, but I was like, ugh. Because some of the stuff was kind of creepy, like super weird noises. But in the video, they show basically people in like robes and like there's like sigils all over the place, but they have candles. and like just really weird stuff, and like a lot of the stuff that they would do, like creepy rituals. Was one of them, or a few of them are, they had to kiss the skull of Geronimo, which comes into play later on, and we'll talk about that. They drink the blood and they lay naked in a coffin, and they do a bunch of other like wild stuff, like sexual stuff. And one thing about this society is they can basically consider themselves a death cult, and we know for a fact that there's multiple people. John Kerry's he's also in this, or he was chosen for this. You have to be chosen basically to get in. You don't get to just run like, you pay, like fraternities, you pay your $1,000 and you're now a member, and then you got to go through this stuff. You are chosen, and John Kerry was in it. All the Bushes, all the way up to great grandfather Bush. So there's a lot of prominent people, that have went to Yale, and they've been, chosen for this group. One thing that if you kind of look back and you go back into history, some things that are not really talked about, and I feel like kind of wild that like nobody, I feel like it's just for me it's common knowledge because I've known this for a while. But Prescott Bush, the patriarch of the Bush clan, he made millions and millions and millions of dollars, and he also funded Hitler and the Nazis. He had a bank in New York, and he made millions and, like I said, millions and millions of dollars off concentration slave labor. That was another reason why they had those, because it was easy, cheap labor, and they could use, these people in the Holocaust to do whatever they needed them to do to make the money that they need to make, or make, the biological weapons. And so that's a known fact. That is you can look that up and you can research that. But Prescott Bush did do that, and he was a known Nazi sympathizer. Another thing about the Skull and Bones is all these artifacts that were basically original Nazi artifacts are alleged to be located in the tomb of the Skull and Bones Society. Another kind of crazy thing. So I couldn't quite find which one it was, but it was either Prescott's dad or Prescott himself actually was alleged to ransack the grave of Geronimo, and that's how Herbert Walker and George W. and that society got Geronimo's skull. And even you can look this up too as well. Like I said, all the stuff that I'm talking about can be researched, and you can look this up. But ancestors of Geronimo's, Geronimo, they sued the university to try to get that stuff back, and I don't think they ever got it back. They may have. Like I said, I hadn't looked that far into it. I just was looking at kind of the Bush stuff. But check it out. But yeah, go check that out. Another kind of weird thing too is, so this has been a conspiracy that's been living on for a while, and it's about George W. So Herbert Walker's wife, Barbara Bush. So she is alleged to be the daughter of Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley is, one of the kind of founders of the occult lifestyle. Like he was really big into the occult and kind of dark arts and stuff like that. And so Barbara Bush's maiden name, it's Barbara Pierce. And Aleister Crowley and her mom were friends, and they had some dealings together in France. And when she was with this other guy, that's why her last name's Pierce, they were gone away or something, some kind of weird thing, but somehow people have equated, because Barbara Bush's mom was around Aleister Crowley at the time of the conception. And so that's been an alleged, and if you look at pictures of Barbara Bush and Aleister Crowley, or Barbara Bush and Aleister Crowley, dude, they look kind of similar. But that's been I know the mainstream media has really criticized that for a long time. But that's another weird kind of thing. And another kind of weird thing about Barbara Bush is that she actually had a miscarriage before George W. And she actually has the fetus in a jar. She had it, and I think it was even on CNN with Larry King. She had the fetus sitting out on a little ledge or something like that. But she, as a young boy, George W., she basically showed him, this is your brother. You always must be nice. Like really talking to him like the fetus was real, which, it's kind of weird, but I know women go through those things, and when they lose, a child and things like that, and it kind of messes with them, and on a emotional, mental level. So I just thought it was kind of strange though that she would, show her son. And then George W. Bush later on, like in the mid-2000s, was like, yeah, my mom would walk around with this fetus in this jar. And it was Matt Lauer was like, really? He was like, yeah, she just kind of, that's what we, she was going through some things, is kind of how he explained it. So the Daddy Bush, which is George Herbert Walker Bush, in 2017, so I'll do, it's kind of it's always a touchy subject talking about sexual assault, but he had allegations between, of younger people, coming out against him in 2017. But, it's been alleged that he has, it's been going on for a long time. Well, in 1989, basically the Washington Post came out on an expose, and I guess some White House staffers came out and was like, hey, George Herbert Walker Bush, was doing some wild things, and he had some basically underage escorts, boys, giving them the White House tour at midnight, and at all hours of the night. And that was strange back then. I mean, it's still strange today. But there's a guy that came out of that whole situation. His name was Paul, I guess Bugnacci. I'm butchering his name. But he had a federal case against a sex trafficker who he was fighting against at this time. And he won. But during his deposition and through the trial, he claimed that Herbert Walker when he was VP, he was always around that activity. And, that he was, in the White House, and that, he was wilding out through multiple presidential, during their time, there in the White House. He was awarded a $1 million sum of money, basically a settlement. Another weird kind of note about, Herbert Walker is that he claims that he wasn't in the CIA. And to me, that's kind of interesting because at the time of the JFK assassination, for a lot of years, a lot of people have kind of said, and this is kind of before they dropped the declassified files of the JFK assassination. And Herbert Walker always claims that he wasn't part of the CIA, that he had nothing to do with anything related to that organization. And it comes to find out, in a part of those files, of the JFK files, there was a man at the time of this document was written, which was back in, when he was assassinated. I think it was like early, not when JFK was assassinated, but when Herbert Walker, was mentioned, George Bush was mentioned in a document, in the late 60s, early 70s about that event. And people have asked him over the years, and he says, oh, it's just another George Bush. But, I mean, I ain't heard of no other George Bushes who are, famous like that. So he also, too, like he said, claimed he never was in the CIA, but he also allegedly, just like I said, I'm keeping this alleged, was seen and was photographed at the depository when they were bringing in Oswald, which is kind of wild. And, I've seen close-ups of the picture. You can type it out, but it looks just like George, Herbert Walker Bush. And what was he doing in Dallas? It's kind of interesting. But see, this is kind of the weird things about Bush. Like George W. One thing that's kind of crazy about him is there's right now everyone has kind of had the wool kind of pulled over, off of their eyes, and they're people are able to see that there really wasn't weapons of dang, I can't even say it now. Weapons of mass destruction. If I get it out, there was never that. And so we went to war for no reason. And, a lot of that has to deal with, every war that we've ever been in. There's always some ulterior motives. Iraq is a perfect weather for opium. This is kind of a crazy story, but I was talking to a guy. Before I became what I'm doing now, in my work life, I had come across a guy who went over there right when the war was, heating up. Not before, but kind of during. And I asked him, I said, how was it over there? And he said, it was pretty boring. Basically, we were just protecting poppy fields. And I thought that was kind of the most wild thing I've ever heard. And to me, it kind of fueled that, gave me some validation that, like, hey, there's a first-hand guy who was over there. I mean, the guy that I was talking to had dog tags, of multiple people that, soldiers who had in his company that was killed over there. And he didn't really like to talk about it, but I always thought it was kind of interesting. He said, yeah, our job was to protect the poppy fields. He said, he said, that's, he's like, I 100% believe that's why we were over there. It's because it's so cheap to make that stuff over there. And so that's a pretty interesting thing. And another thing that I had mentioned kind of briefly in a previous episode was about the fact that Obama and Bush are related. And, that's kind of a crazy thing to think about, and like how many people George W. Bush is related to. I mean, you look at Madonna is like his 9th cousin. Dick Cheney and Obama are related to Bush. And, to me, that's very interesting that all these famous people, Abraham Lincoln too as well. It's very interesting to me who's all related, because one thing that, eventually when we talk about the Illuminati and we talk about like, the global elite, things like that, and that'll be an episode down the pipeline, but, what's his name? Jeez, I'm drawing a blank now, but anyways, the guy that said it, George Carlin, he said that they're in a club and you ain't in it. And, people that retain power, I mean, you look at the monarchs over in all these European countries, like their family stayed in line, like they're not losing that power. And it's the same thing here in America that I think is kind of interesting to look at, as you look at all these celebrities and people of, note. And like I said, I'm still sad Brad Pitt's part of that. I was like, dang it, man. I thought he was a good old boy from Shawnee, Oklahoma. I was about to be happy, but he's got some dealings with Angelina Jolie too as well. But like I said, there's just some tidbit of information, about the Bushes, and like I said, eventually we will get into 9/11. This is kind of a prerequisite to that episode, because there are some dealings with different people that George Herbert Walker Bush was involved with, and I know that there's also some ties to the Hinckley family, and like I said, that'll be something down in the pipeline of the 9/11 episode. It's kind of hard to talk about that, because I mean, there's people out there that say that it's not real. Nobody died, or none of this happened, and I don't believe that at all. I believe 100% that people died, but my irritation is the fact that people actually died and our country did that to us, and that's all I'm going to say. But so you guys can catch me on TikTok, One Man Band 918. Twitter's the same, One Man Band 918. Facebook, Yehola Tiger. Message me. If you like the podcast, rate the podcast. Give that baby 5 stars, because I'll be giving you all that 5-star information. No, but I appreciate everyone that listens, and I'll catch you on the next one.